Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 344 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to build and test our new Plutonium power plant. Enjoy! We've got two setups to build, one for the 234 and one for the Plutonium. But they need to be sufficiently far away from each other that they can have their own logic. And is there enough water here to do this setup twice? Well, if we select everything, we need, assuming it is correct, and it probably is, 63.3 K of water. And is it going to tell us this? It does. 190 K, because I think we determined that you get 72 K out of just one of these. So what I think that means is that we can build the same setup again, but over here somewhere. Far enough away where the pipes line up, but the substations don't reach. So let's clear everything to right there for now. And we're probably going to need to get rid of at least all of these. And yeah, looks like we lost our radar. Since these reactors will always have power, it won't be too big a deal for them to just power this radar here. I guess just like right there. And robots will be here in a little bit to place that. So we need another one, and we need to be careful that when we place it, oh, that's a lot to pick up, that we don't let it burn its fuel. So actually, knowing that, we may want to, as unfortunate as it is, just pick up one of these for now. Well, if you put it at the maximum length of the water pipes, the wires will not reach. And hopefully we can make this work here. But we need to come in here and basically change all this out. So let's pick everything up now so it doesn't try to deliver anything. So the way the reactor is going to work is going to be a little different. So if you remember, with our uranium reactors, in order to keep these heat pipes at the sufficient temperature, we need the reactors to be warm enough, but if they're too warm, this will max out at 999 and will waste fuel. So we have it set to go up to 800. Well, a 235 cell has 2 gigajoules in it, and the 234 only has 1.5, so it's less of a problem. But what about the mixed oxide fuel cells that have 8 gigajoules? It essentially means that it's going to pretty much go up to maximum temperature if we have these reactors any sort of warm before they get their fuel. Although the concept of the reactor is going to be the same, the application of it is going to be different. So the uranium reactors are a mainline power source. They're not really a byproduct, so they're meant to always be on and always be hot. But plutonium is different. It's essentially a byproduct. And I placed them far enough away where the wires don't reach, but I guess that wasn't really necessary. The plutonium is always going to be connected. How it's going to be controlled is simply by the temperature of the heat pipes and the presence of fuel. And that's basically it. At some point I need to start making these Nixie tubes. It's just they're not used very often, so I don't really think about them. So let's switch around the things we know we need to switch. Like these now pick up those fuel cells. These are still waiting for their on signals. And we can put these requester chests in. And this concept is still the same, where it needs to have at least one fuel cell in there to send the on signal, because there's still no point in the reactors turning on if there's no fuel. And this one will look to see if they're all there. What's going to change here are the temperatures. So previously we wanted this set at 800, and that's still a good number in the sense that that's the minimum temperature it essentially needs to be to make sure that heat makes it to the end. However, there's going to be an additional condition that will turn these on and off, and that is the status of the accumulators. So let's make a signal receiver and put it somewhere. We'll get it worked out in a little bit here. But let's pull in the signal. It'll be the A signal. So we'll put the combinator in there. We got to get it wired in. Now these inserters are going to require 5 signals to be correct before they will run. And the final signal will be A, which is the status of the accumulators. And I think we determined that plutonium had the lowest priority. So it would be 15, and it gets a green square. And we would need the input signal, which would come from somewhere here. And oh, that blocks the walking path right there. But oh well, it's the price of progress. The signals are as follows. The accumulators get low, so A turns on, and then it looks at all of the other conditions that the other reactors have. Are there fuel in all 4 chests? If so, +1. Is the reactor cool enough to the point where it might not produce maximum power anymore? If yes, +1. Are the reactors essentially empty of fuel? If so, +1. And is the power switch turned on? If so, +1. If all 5 of those are correct, the inserters swing. In this situation, we actually don't need a latch for power because it's already built into the reactors that, let's say, the accumulator gets below 15%. All the other conditions are good. The inserter swings. Well, now there's fuel in the reactor, so the inserter can't swing again. And eventually these get warm and will raise the accumulators to something. It's going to be a lot higher than 15, but they're going to run for their 8 gigajoules and eventually stop. They will not be allowed to put any more fuel in because of this combinator and the existence of fuel, and this combinator because the temperature is sufficiently high. So the latch works by it turns on with A, and it basically gets a single swing of fuel, and then after that, even if A is no longer the case, so it's not below 15, these will still produce power so long as the fuel holds out. And then when the fuel is gone, if A is above 15, or any of those other conditions are true, then it stops. However, if it's done burning the fuel, and A is still below 15%, well, then it depends on, is the temperature low enough? If the temperature is low enough, they'll swing. If it's not, they'll wait until it cools down. So this is the concept of this reactor. It does have the negative side effect that it needs to be pre-warmed in the sense that A has to be sufficiently low before it'll ever turn on for the first time. But it saves us a lot of complicated switches later on. And right now we have a surplus of uranium fuel because it's stuck in this warehouse. But eventually this is all going to clog up. And actually I see that we need to have some space left over for the uranium from processing the fuel to go through. So we do need to consider that. But for now, we can pull all the fuel in, and we can give this one reactor a test. And because it's always connected, that any fuel we put in it will be instantly consumed, and even though A will no longer be below 15, it will continue to consume any heat it has until it won't produce any electricity. So it will have a startup process of the fuel gets put in and it has to warm up before it reaches full power. But it's going to be at 615 degrees, so pretty much the second the fuel gets in, some of these will turn on. So if we're at the point where plutonium's being burned, we're also burning 234 if it's available. We're also burning 235. We're also burning our solids. And the solar panels, if it's daytime, will also be providing power. So it's not like it's going to be the only thing in the factory. And in the event that the plutonium reactors create way too much power, well, all of these other supporting methods will turn off and allow the plutonium reactors to finish their process, ideally without wasting any fuel. How can we be missing radar components? Because we have them, but it looks like it's tier 4 is not running for some reason, so I guess we gotta check up on that. Did something about the recipe change? Or no? There's no inserter. That explains it. Okay then. By the way, how's the pollution cloud doing? Okay, that's gotta be getting smaller. It really looks like it's getting smaller now. It's still touching the biters, but it's slowly shrinking. And it looks like our wall is finally done. But nonetheless, let's get the reactor tested first. We've got our fuel cells ready to give this a shot. And for now, I'm going to emulate the A signal by just making this a 2, because we should already have 3 on signals, one for the low temperature, one for the lack of fuel, and one for the presence of fuel outside the reactors. Now it's just waiting on the switch at A, so we'll bypass A by just making this 2. So they swing once. We're burning the plutonium, but you see the fuel level is going down much, much slower than it does with uranium. And you see we have 8,000 megajoules now. And the temperature rises quite rapidly compared to the amount of fuel that's available. So you can see how one fuel cell basically got it halfway there to maximum heat. Not quite, because it's not at the ends, but it's close. But you can see though that if it wasn't actually producing any electricity, that if you waited for it to be down to 800 or even to 615, it would probably start wasting fuel. So you pretty much have to be guaranteed that the reactor will be cooling down from making electricity before you actually put fuel in. And it goes again because the reactors are warm, and at this point we probably don't need the on signal anymore, or at least we don't need the 2. Because let's see what happens. This is kind of an example. Let's say the accumulators were below 15%, and let's pretend it was warm enough. This will give a test for how it will work, and down there. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but starting to make power. And when this hits 615, it means the heat exchangers on the very end can start running. And it kind of needs to go above, so it has. And you can see that the temperature continues to increase. And in fact, now that I think about it, we need to hook this up in a different way. So let's hurry up and do that before this thing overheats here. Let's hook it up because it always is connected. It's not waiting for uranium to be connected. It always connects because you can see that we still have half of the fuel left and this temperature keeps rising. If we let it go at full blast, it does hold it back. And we can see that it's running, and this is only one set of reactors, so it's not really making that much power, but it's contributing all the same. And sorry for the steam kind of blocking numbers. Maybe we'll go to this side. It'll cool down, but let's pretend the A signal no longer exists. So now that it doesn't have that, it's not allowed to put any more fuel in, and the reactors will cool down. And the wind keeps changing directions. And it'll get below the point that it needs to be at. And it starts getting really cool. And let's set this back to 2. Let's pretend A went below 15 again. So it gets its fuel. Temperature increases. It does take a little while for it to reach full power. But other setups that aren't plutonium will be providing power during this time, so it's quite unlikely that the accumulators would get this low. Essentially, the only reason they would get this low is because uranium fuel ran out. But it starts to heat up again, and once it gets to about 800, the heat exchangers kind of hold it in place. And still hasn't reached full power, because this red light kind of has to turn off to show that it occurred. But it's very close to full power at this point. So you can see even a relatively small setup like this does have trouble keeping the turbine in the very back heated up. And you can see, based on the power output there, that it's almost there. It's getting very close. It pretty much takes most of the fuel cell before it gets to maximum power, but it gets to like 80% or 90% power within the first few seconds of turning on. This is like the worst possible direction for the wind for reading these. But the light's still red, but it's just starting to exceed 615, but it kind of needs to be around 620, which is why I have the light set to that. But that's how it works. And then let's say the accumulators are good again, and then this will slowly cool down. So that is the concept. The only disadvantage is we have to fire this up for the first time, but it basically looked like it took 2 fuel cells for each reactor to heat up. So we need to get this set up before we run out of uranium fuel. So I think that's all of it. Put that there. Put that there. Guess we can connect this on this side too. Why not? And now that we have 3 of them to match the uranium setup, we're going to need a total of 3 more sets of these. So that'll be 1, that'll be 2, and that'll be 3. So there's all of our reactors. And both sets combined will probably be able to do about 16 gigawatts, but the intended use of these reactors is that they basically run one at a time, or one or the other. It just doesn't seem like that because they're kind of cycling between each other. And one thing we do need to make sure to get configured once all this is placed is make sure that this signal wire actually makes it across to all these without crossing something it's not supposed to. Okay, we need to wait for the rest of this stuff to get placed first. Then we can manually fill them up with their initial fuel. Wait, that's a filter inserter. It really shouldn't be. And actually, we could probably put that same chest on the science bus too, just to give that 34K of gold somewhere to go. Put it right there, I suppose. I kind of want to do another line in Circuit HUD that has all of our power setups included, so we can check to see each one rather than looking for flashing that's down there. Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, more orbs for everybody. Maybe I should help. Oh god, it's not really helping that much. There's so much. Okay, those guns are pretty powerful. But like I was saying, I think I want a new line on Circuit HUD to specifically monitor all of our different ways of making power, because I find myself constantly looking at here to see what the accumulator charge is, and I'd rather just have some signals for the different reactor types, whether or not they're running, and what the accumulator's at. It's going to be probably kind of annoying. We're going to have to use a lot of signal transmitters for this, but it should be fine. Well, okay, let's be super careful then. Do not step foot outside the wall or get blown up by the turret. Lesson learned. There's no gates for a reason. It's not safe out there. A lot of these guns, though, are still waiting on ammo. Is it being produced? No. What's that for a lack of? Glycerol. And that is because no hydrochloric acid. Oh. Something weird's going on here. It looks like we did not put filter inserters in there and it got all clogged up. Alright, well, let's get the rest of this wall building then. And we can go up there and fix that. Lots and lots of things to fix. But you don't find out about them until something goes wrong. Luckily, those gun turrets aren't really the things that are actually making the factory safe. It's pretty much exclusively those plasma turrets that are doing it. Let's have at it again. And put it like right there. There we go, that fits rather nicely. We can angle that turret to the side. Although the corner of this might be a little weak. Unless we pick stuff up and move it back a little bit. There we go, that ought to cover things pretty well. Okay, let's get these filters set. Wonder how long this has been like this. Those must be sulfur only. There we go. Making the glycerol again, which means back to making cordite. And those are all running at full blast, so it's just going to take a little while. Okay, I think I finally got all that wired in, and hopefully it works correctly. They still have a ways to go on the reactors, though. We'll do a decider in here. Signal goes in. The condition is remaining fuel is more than 0. And give us a mixed oxide fuel cell. and then shoot that into the network. We kind of need to do the same thing down here. Do another decider. This time, remaining fuel is greater than 0. Give us a 235 cell. So that gives us the status of either reactor setup and if they're burning fuel. If possible, it would also be nice to know if the solid fuel burners are actually burning anything. But they don't run very often, so it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, we can safely assume that this thing is basically always going, since it seems like it's getting very little fuel. So for now, we probably don't need to worry about it. And of course, we can use the A signal to determine what is actually running and not running at any given time. We'd also want to know what's going on with the uranium processing, and I see it's inching forward because we're consuming a little bit of uranium fuel, making more space in here. But we always need to leave some, so I guess we'll put the signals back in, and it has to be above 20,000 to let that go through. So how about this is below 24,000? It'll let the fuel in. Any 235s that so happen to make it through will just go to where they need to go, but for the most part it'll be the 238 that holds it back. And yes, and this thing needs to be limited too. Let's do 24,500. There we go. That will always leave a little bit of space in there for the fuel reprocessing to happen, and this sad thing is continuing to create our fuel cells, but we have a whole bunch of them to place, so it's going to take a little while, but there only needs to be one in there for any of these to start, so the logic doesn't care about that. We should be keeping track of the status of each of these storehouses just to make sure that they are remaining balanced with each other, and if they are, we potentially could take them off. But for now, I would like to follow them. And let's put this over here because nothing much is probably going over there, where that signal goes in, and also plutonium. Okay, we have status of fuels and status of reactors. That should be enough. Although I'm using receivers when I should have been using transmitters. Whoops. Oh wow, look at that. We're completely out of orbs. We used everything. But, something tells me there's more. Oh yes. Thousands and thousands. But, oh yeah. The pollution cloud is absolutely reducing. For sure. It is dissipating away. So before too long, hopefully the biters will stop being so angry. So there's the signal transmitter. There's your signals. Okay, I guess we can like place it right there instead. So many reactors. Although we do actually need the receiver here, because that is supplying the A signal. However, that can go in there. I guess this is as good as a place as any. So let's put some arithmetic combinators in there on all of the signals we want to pull out. We, of course, wanted A. We wanted all the fuel types. Probably should include uranium-234. Even though it's doubtful that we'll ever actually have any meaningful amount of it. Of course, 235, 238, and plutonium for now. Maybe we can add other stuff later. But we're looking for the HUD combinator. We'll connect everything and it should show up. Let's call this power. So there we go, near the bottom. But now that's at a glance we can see what's going on with the accumulators, where the level goes down below 30 and then it clicks on the reactors. We should be seeing at least one of the reactors sending an on signal, but I guess it's just based on this one. So as long as this one is not running, we're not going to get a signal. But I guess we can kind of watch this to see that the temperature is almost below 800. And now that it is, the reactor's running and we get a cell. All this is doing is just telling us one of the reactors is running, but we can use it as a general idea for how often things are turning on and off. It should average out pretty easily. So while this is going, the plutonium reactors won't run at all because we have plenty of uranium left. But because of this limit we put on here, as you see it went to a nice 69 uranium left, that eventually it's going to run out and it's only going to be 238 that's left. And then we're going to be running on plutonium until it clears enough of this out to where we can start making 235 and 234 again. But because this warehouse is here with so much extra 238, that is going to be in the future. That we're going to have to go through all of this first, either by making ammo or plutonium for the use in rockets, before those uranium reactors are going to run again. So the factory is going to switch over to plutonium at some point, and hopefully it's not a disaster. And these solid fuel burners are just, you know, doing what they can. They were never intended to fully run. They're just running whenever something so happens to be available, and it's not often available, but hey, we can take a look at that and see if we can improve efficiency there. Still working on the reactor setup, but the good news is that most of these lasers have been delivered. Still waiting on ammo, and it's just very strange how these chests get orbs in there. It does not make sense to me how that can happen. Hopefully it hasn't happened on any of these other walls, and it doesn't seem to have. That it's just a thing right there. And we're continuing to make ammo, it's just big buffer. But now we can clear this old wall out and acquire some more ammo in the process. Probably need to put some more radars down. Seems like the reactors are mostly built. So for now I'll put a couple of the radars in the corners of the wall, and then from there figure out where the holes are later, because it's kind of hard to tell because the radar takes up more space than the entire minimap, so can't really use it for figuring out where to place them. Okay, well we need some fuel cells here. It's actually an insane amount of fuel that it's currently building up a buffer to. Probably what we can do is just yank fuels off of one of the reactors. We just need to get them all warmed up, and when we pull some of the fuel cells out, now there's no fuel in here and this won't be allowed to run anyway. So I'm thinking we'll just fly over each one, and we kind of determined that they needed 2 fuel cells each to get fully warmed up, and of course some of that is going to be dumped into the network. But that's fine, it'll just take up the mantle from uranium for a little while. So we can watch what happens to A here as these all warm up. Feels weird to manually load plutonium into reactors. Something seems wrong about this. But we are flying though, so maybe we're just dropping them in the reactors and they're just working. But there's the fuel cell on our list here, which means that plutonium reactors are on, which is what we'd expect to see. So now we just gotta wait it out and let them warm up. And as they do, they should significantly charge the accumulators while they're going. Nowhere to go. What's jammed in here? Oh, that is a lot of cannon shells. 6.1k? Really? Wow. Well, that's an issue. I think we just need to reverse factory those. Does cordite go into them? So we can turn it into ammo instead? Explosive cannon shell. And that just has explosives, so unfortunately no. Nonetheless, we probably should deconstruct them because we do not need that much. But now they're warming up to operational temperature, and you can see that they are really charging the accumulators. But 2.82 gigajoules does not seem right. Yeah, we actually lost the connection on a whole bank of accumulators, which is kind of a problem. So, let's get the robots to place that. It might take them a little too long, but at least all of these will be synchronized at 100, I guess, because now they're topped off. So that is not what we would want to see. But it's actually not the worst thing in the world, so long as this temperature does not get to 1000. Luckily, the robots are pretty fast now, so it doesn't take them nearly as long to get things done. And it looks like they did not overheat, regardless. But nonetheless, there we go, we're connected, and now suddenly these things are blazing at full speed to get the rest of these accumulators charged. And they probably will, because one thing we're working on is getting more and more accumulators. Because when you think about it, we have 48 reactors here, and each one can hold 8 gigajoules of fuel. Assuming each one of these reactors got a single swing of fuel, then that's 384 gigajoules of energy. And oh, that's spooky. 666 gigajoule capacity. But we are topped off, so that would fill us up from 15% to almost maximum. Since we're mostly caught up on a lot of things, we can probably finish with our upgrades. It looks like it's still set. So if we come through here, grab all of that, that should finish up the factory here. Yeah, pretty much. And then maybe place even a few more of them so we can get to that magic 1 terajoule of energy because reasons. So let's zoom in here to the dark spot. Just try to guess where the middle is. It's right about here, so have a radar. And you have a radar. It's fine if the reactors get it to 100%. It's not necessarily taking full advantage of the solar panels, but they're not wasting any energy so long as their heat is below 1000 degrees. But we definitely need more accumulators because we want a sufficient amount of accumulators where we really don't have to worry about not having somewhere to put the energy. So a terajoule would probably be pretty good for this number of reactors. And they're definitely going, but they've just about cooled down. And then I guess we'll see A start decreasing. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to build our uranium-234 power plant, as well as process the MOX fuel cells from our plutonium plant. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.